Thank you. That was one of the questions I was having, was if it was going to be before the big discussion or not. So just 1 second for water. Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, my name is Chad Novak, and you know who I am. Talking about the boundary alteration, property tax exemptions. I talked about this last year. It's word for word almost the same thing I spoke last year, so you guys, well, some of you will be aware, some of you are new, so. Where should I start here? I feel strongly that the overall concept of tax exemptions for properties brought into city boundaries is fair to an extent, as it can be quite a jump in property taxes going from the RM to a city the size of Regina. With that said, the question becomes just how much is fair, for how long, and, most importantly, should it make a difference if the property owner did not want to be annexed versus those that had explicitly requested to be annexed? Further, considering the fact that you are also considering raising everyone else's taxes even further in the revised 2017 budget, this is only a further slap in the face to the rest of Regina residents. Now, based on my research, the general consensus is that the exemption amount and the time contained within this framework is more than fair, where the amount and length of exemption is dependent upon the anticipated timeline of when the affected lands may be used for city purposes rather than RM purposes. However, there is a serious concern amongst taxpayers regarding property owners that specifically requested to be annexed versus those that were annexed against their wishes, as well as differentiating between commercial and residential property owners. Also, and we can't stress this enough, the ability to pay should be a major factor. Should I pause, sir? I will make sure you're paying attention.
I have your report in front of us. Continue on.
I'll remember that. Now let me get back to where I was. The ability to pay should be a major factor, and like is policy for other city services, it is felt that any affected property owners should have to demonstrate that the additional property taxes will cause quote-unquote unreasonable financial hardship as a result of annexation. And in fact, this clause was included within this very policy, as you see in Appendix A. We would be remiss to not mention the fact that according to real estate experts, the mere act of annexation immediately increases the affected property values because of the fact that they are now within city jurisdiction and have access to city services. Keeping this in mind, it is a fact that a major property owner east of Tower Road very quickly flipped some of their affected lands to the province for the Regina bypass and to the city for the Pacer ballpark relocation for upwards of 10 times the value immediately prior to annexation. This was with absolutely no improvement to the lands by that property owner. Further, on the concept of unreasonable financial hardship, it seems only reasonable that a homeowner who has lived in the RM for decades should be considered more so for relief than the additional from the additional property taxes versus, say, a giant multi-million-dollar corporation who explicitly requested to be annexed into the city for quote-unquote undisclosed reasons, who ought to have anticipated and budgeted for the additional property taxes. Now, a reasonable person would argue that they most certainly have the ability to afford the higher taxes, even before taking into account the financial benefits that is realized because of that annexation. As you can see in Appendix B, one of these companies publicly traded AGT Foods on East Primrose Drive, which is amongst a group of companies associated with Alliance Pulse Processors, Long Lake Investment Inc., and NutriSun Foods, is set to receive over $80,000 in property tax exemption alone. Pardon me, that's from last year, so it may be different this year. When factored into...
1 minute to go in your presentation.
When factored over the anticipated 15-year lifespan of this exemption, barring any further extensions, that translates to over $1.2 million in lost property taxes to the city of Regina, and in turn, its residents. Now, for a company with annual revenues nearing $2 billion, as outlined in Appendix C, I would hardly consider them to have realized any unreasonable financial hardship due to annexation. Finally, it is also important to note that the aforementioned properties were never previously included in any long-term 25-year official community plans prior to 2013, the question that a reasonable person would have to ask: why then were these lands annexed, and why did we not stick to the 25-year plans as previously designed up to 2011? Thank you for your time this evening, and I will gladly answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you for your presentation. Very good, Armin. Thank you very
Thank you.
much. And we'll move on to consideration of CM 14-4, boundary alteration, 2017.